Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 61 of the English with Kirsty podcast, and this is a solo episode this week, and I'm going to be talking about interviews, and more specifically the kinds of questions that you shouldn't ask at an interview, because an interview, a job interview, is your opportunity to show the potential employer what you can do, to let them get to know you, to find out more about the company as well and the position. It's not just them interviewing you, it's you also finding a bit more about the job and whether you actually want it. Because sometimes the job can look really good on paper, but when you find out a bit more, it's not as good as you think. So the interview is also a chance for you to find out about that. But it can be a problem if you get all the way through the interview and then your last question is not something that puts you in a good light. So if you'd like a podcast episode about what you should ask at an interview, then I can do that. Please leave a message in the comments if you'd like me to do that. And this week's show notes page will be www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 61, and there you can also sign up for the 20 interview tips fact sheet. So if you go there, you can request the fact sheet as well. But today we're specifically going to talk about the kinds of questions that you shouldn't ask. I remember being on an interview panel and we had various candidates, and one particular person said something that was so inappropriate in terms of the question that we'd asked, and although we then went away and looked at each of the candidates' strengths and who would be the right person for the job, for me this particular candidate was always the person who made the really inappropriate comment. So people will remember you by what you say and do, so don't ask any questions like the ones here. So you've got 12 of them, 12 things that you shouldn't ask. And I haven't just made these up. I've spoken to people who work in recruitment and who interview a lot of candidates for positions and asked them what some of the worst questions that they have actually been asked are. So these are from, a lot of these are from people's experiences they told me about. So, number one, what do you think of the other candidates so far? So that's none of your business. That's not what you're there for. You shouldn't be trying to find out information about the other candidates. You should focus on what you have to offer, your questions about anything you want to know more about, but you shouldn't be asking about other people, because they're not going to tell you anyway, but they won't have a very good opinion of you if you do that. 2, when can I take my holiday? If you do get the job and you have a holiday that's booked and paid for and can't move, then that's a discussion that you'll need to have, but not at the initial interview stage, and certainly not just a general question about, oh, I want my holidays, because that gives the wrong impression. It sounds like you're not somebody who's interested in working, but you just want to be on holiday all the time, and that's the most important thing for you. So that gives the impression that you're not very committed to the job if the first thing you want to know is when you can not be there, when you can be on holiday. 3, are you going to check my Facebook? They may or they may not, but if you ask that, it sounds as if you have something to hide. And if that is something that you would want to ask, then maybe you need to have a look at your Facebook settings, look at the privacy, make sure that they are as you would want them to be. But asking that in an interview, well, if somebody asked me that, it would make me think, oh, okay, what do they have to hide then? Number 4, what happened to the last person who had this job? It may come up, but they may choose to offer that information, but it's not really any of your business whether they chose to leave or had to leave, or it may come up in conversation, but I would suggest that that's not the best question that you can ask. 5, can I work from home whenever I want? Working from home is fabulous. I love it, and I loved it even before I worked for myself, but And you may want to know about how things work in the office, but I think it's phrasing this question differently. So, does all of the work take place in the office? How much travel is there? Do you have a policy about working from home? I think these questions sound more objective and less kind of demanding than, oh, can I do whatever I want? So sometimes there is something that you want to know, and it's not necessarily wrong to ask that, because more and more organizations do have some kind of home working policy. But just to say, oh, can I do whatever I want? Can I work from home whenever I want? It sounds as if it's just the office trying to fit around your life rather than you making the most of the opportunities that are available. So sometimes the questions in themselves are not wrong, but you need to think about how you phrase them to make them a bit more objective and a bit less like you just being demanding. Number 6, do you like working here? And that puts the interviewer on the spot, really. You're not there to interview them, you're there to find out more information about the company or the job, or things directly related to the job, or maybe the projects that you'll be working on, what the company's plans are. But personal questions to the interviewer should be avoided, because it will make them feel uncomfortable. It will probably make them like you less because of it, but also it's not something that you need to know. I mean, if you really want to know what people think about working there, then do some research online and look up the company and see if employees have said anything about it online. Fine, but don't put your interviewer on the spot by asking them whether they like working there. Number 7, when can I have a pay rise? Why should you have a pay rise? You haven't contributed anything yet. You haven't done anything yet. Why would you be asking for a pay rise? That's not cool. You have to at least prove your worth. I mean, it's different to have salary negotiations and to discuss what your salary will be if you were successful in getting the job, but to ask for a rise before you've even contributed anything to the company just makes you look greedy. And nobody wants to employ a greedy person. Number 8, this is actually a true one. Can I have your phone number? No. Don't ask the interviewer for their personal phone number. When I asked about this, it was apparently so that they could invite her out for coffee or something if they were to get the job, and that's creepy more than anything else. You don't need to ask for people's personal phone numbers, and you certainly don't need to try and lure them out for coffee or drinks or dinner or whatever if they get the job. That's not professional, and it puts them in a difficult position. But you just don't do it. It's not cool. You have contact details for the company. You don't need to ask for people's personal phone numbers. Number 9, and this came from a recruiter as well. Like, can I have the newest smartphone with this model, and can I have these features, and can I have the best camera, and all these things? Like, oh, really? I mean, you may have specifications about, I don't know, where technology that you need to have, or you may want to find out what's available in the office. I don't think that's wrong, but to come with a shopping list before you've even got the job about things which aren't essential, like, can I have the seat near the window, if you have a reason for that, like you need certain light conditions to work in because of a medical condition. I'm not talking about those kind of things, but I am talking about going with your shopping list before you've even been offered the job. I mean, there are negotiations that happen after this point, but you haven't even been selected yet, and you have your shopping list. That makes you sound like you're going to be someone that's quite difficult to work with, quite demanding, quite self-centered. And so that's a lot of these things. That's the problem with a lot of these questions that people ask. It puts the focus too much on you and what you want, and rather than what you're actually going to bring and offer to the company. Number 10, do you monitor email and internet use? Again, you may want to know that, but if you ask at the interview, it's a bit like the Facebook one. If somebody asked me that, I think, well, is that because they're planning to go shopping all the time, or what are they planning to do? So think about whether you want to be known as the candidate that flagged that up. And at the end, how did I do? Well, most interviews are an interview panel, and the panel is going to want to have a conversation about that and to evaluate all the candidates. And I think this comes out of nervousness, and people want some kind of reassurance that it went okay. But asking the interviewer how you did is not a good thing, because they're not going to say, oh, you were awful. And they're not going to say necessarily that you, even if you did well, they probably can't tell you that, because there are other candidates to see. They've been offered interviews, and they have to interview all the candidates before they decide which one they want. So even though you may be tempted to ask how you did, don't do it, because it's a question that's difficult for the interviewer to answer, because they can't commit to, oh, you were amazing, and then you don't get the job because someone even more amazing came up. You just wait and find out the outcome of the interview without asking questions like that could make the interviewer feel uncomfortable. And along that vein, number 12, when do I start? Well, it may be a joke, but it just comes across as really arrogant. And another someone that worked in recruitment that told me about this, and it doesn't come across well when somebody asks that, because you think, well, you haven't got the job yet. That you make it sound as if you think you're the only possible person who could get this job, but we do have others, and just wait and find out, and don't be overly confident, because some people are like that, but some people try to hide their lack of confidence by being overly confident like that, and it doesn't come across well. So all of these things, maybe you would never have said any of these things, in which case that's a great thing, but sometimes we hear about things that we should say, and I thought it would be good to do a list, or to make this list of things that you shouldn't say and things that people have said, and I don't think that any of these people actually got the jobs. So if you want to get the interview tips fact sheet, you can go to the show notes page, www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 61. And if you want me to do something about questions you should ask, then leave me a note in the comments there, and I will book that in for a future episode. Okay, next week we have another interview, so I will be preparing that and putting it up for next week. Have a good week, everyone, and have fun learning English. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.